zodiac signs represent a lot more than one thing, and nothing can be more true of that than Gemini, especially the signs that represent duality, which is Pisces and Gemini, and all of the mutable signs, which also include Virgo and Sagittarius, have this element of being more than one thing. And definitely with Gemini season, it teaches you that just because you are one thing does not mean you can't be something else. Like, just because you're a poet doesn't mean you can't be like a stockbroker or a baseball player or something that seems not to go. And I don't know, I've been thinking about that because I think this Gemini season, the duality aspect and the that twin shadow aspect, I feel has been the most highlighted. Last Gemini season, man, I saw so much of the generosity of Gemini, which is a trait that maybe isn't often assigned to this sign, but I just always see it. I always see the generosity of information, with money, with anything that they can share. And yes, air signs love to share. They love to have a give and take exchange. But let's talk about the duality of Gemini. And when I think of Gemini, I think of walking and seeing your shadow. And are you aware that your shadow is walking beside you? And who leads? Does the shadow lead or you? And the shadow is not negative. The shadow is undefined. And that's what's so cool by it. It's this, this idea of Gemini having, being a twin, and that comes from mythology, Castor and Pollux, and Helen to a certain extent, but it's this idea that one is assigned the quality of good and the other is assigned the quality of negative. Or rather, I think another way to see it is the more you define your shadow, it's more about giving it the definition you want rather than letting it take on the side of you that is repressed or the side of you that is not defined, and letting it have its own personality. And I think that's the thing about a Gemini or Gemini energy. And again, we have this in our chart. Doesn't matter if you don't have planets there, you have Gemini in your chart. So you have this opportunity to see your shadow and the opportunity to give definition to your shadow, to give it light, to not let it just take over and be its own thing. I think when we're unconscious of the other side of ourself, the other side of our thoughts, if we believe one thing, what is on the other side of that belief? Or if we think one thing, what is on the other side of that thought? If we look at both and we acknowledge both, then our shadow and our self are one and the same. But it's easy to kind of let the shadow run wild. And it's just, I don't know, it's just an interesting thing. I will say that I think when talking about being, one thing being true doesn't mean something else can't be true about you. You can be one thing but be another. I think what limits that is the descendant of Gemini, and the opposite side of that axis is Sagittarius. Because, you wouldn't see a vegan who is a hunter per se, because the other side of Gemini is our ideology and our belief system. So that can limit the truth of what is, which is Gemini. Gemini is the truth, the fact of what is. So the only way it will limit you from being one thing and something else is if on the axis, on the opposite end, Sagittarius, if that does not align with your beliefs and your ideology. So food for thought on Gemini, on the shadow, on the multiplicity that is, and I think that's what we're seeing today. I bring this up because we're not seeing people in singular roles anymore. We're seeing people that are activists and celebrities. We're seeing people that are nurses and heroes. And we're understanding that there's a broadening of all these terms. And I think that when, with the North Node in Gemini, and when Jupiter and Saturn are in Aquarius, both air signs, I just think that we're going to see that a lot of lines blur, and that there's a lot more, that we have to hold a lot more truths in one cup. You know, the when the energy leaves from Capricorn, which is known to kind of like compartmentalize and like classify, this is this is that, this is that, and not really be keen on like mixing, I think we're gonna have a lot of dissolving, and we're gonna have a lot of like things, mini truths taking place, and having to hold that at once. So those are just like some thoughts on Gemini season thus far. I hope all is well. Thank you guys. You guys inspire me with your activism, with standing up for what's right, and I just want to thank you. If you're feeling slow.